Yeah, my computer crashed, so I gotta redo this. Basically, I was asked what is needed to import models to Amnesia. It's fairly simple. First off, let's see, you have a model here. It's a cube, it could be anything. The first thing you need to make sure is that your on export is that your pivot point is at 0, 0, 0, which is in the center of the program's world. If, for example, this whole thing here, this infinite space was a world, the coordinates for the center would be at 0, 0, 0, which is x0, y0, and z0. So when your pivot point, which is this thing here, which controls the sort of like rotation and the movement of the model, if that thing is at 0, you are good to go. And in case you have a model which doesn't have the pivot point at 0, 0, 0, but it should be, let's say that I want my cube to be at floor level. So it's at this height, so that when I place it in the editor, it spawns perfectly on the ground. Then I need to change my pivot points back to 0, 0, 0. So I can do that by just creating another object and then using something called combine. And then separate again, remove the excess cube, and my pivot point is now at 0, 0, 0. Next up, you need to have a texture assigned to your model. In Maya, you can do this by going into the material of the model. You can assign the materials. The engine will look for the naming of this particular texture you assign in the program here. So if I assign this thing, go texture main as my texture, the engine will look for this texture in the folder of the model. It will look for this thing here, go texture main. And the naming for the rest of the textures will be based upon this. So if my diffuse texture in the modeling program is called go texture main, the normal map should be named go texture main underscore MRM, and the specular map should be named spec underscore spec. So the only thing really important is this name, the name of the diffuse texture linked in your modeling program. Next up, to export the model, you need to have it triangulated. You can do this here in the modeling program by triangulating it from the options. You can also have your export set. You should have Open Collada. There's actually a built-in DAE export, but for various reasons prefer the Open Collada one if you can get it. Amnesia was made with Maya 2007, I think, which basically had an older version of Collada, and this Open Collada is more like that version used. I don't know if A Machine for Pigs has changed this a lot to like add support for this newer one. This one is new as well, but it mimics an older version of Collada. So use Open Collada. I can have a link for it. So with my plugin here selected, make sure you also load it here. Go into, if you have Maya, you gotta load them. So go into Window, Settings and Preferences, Plugin Manager, and here's all my plugins where I can find the Collada Maya MML, and I can press this I here, and I see some info about it. Okay, it's plugin version 1.3.0, and it's made by Net Allied Systems. And here's the file translators. So as you can see, Open Colada. This is the one. I set it to load and auto load, so that it loads every time you start up Maya. So that makes it show up here in my export selection. I can pick it here, and I can set it here as an option to triangulate my mesh, which basically means that upon export it does the thing I did previously automatically. So you should have that. It's nice. You don't have to do it then by yourself for every model. It's easy to forget. And next up, I think I'm gonna swap over to something else I've made previously today and imported, which we can see here, I think. So I have these meshes here, and one other thing is that you should have one UV map per mesh. I can't have multiple textures on the same mesh, so I can export several meshes. So that this one has one set of UVs and this one has one set of UVs. I can export them together as one model, and it would require two textures, but I can't have like two UV maps for this. So I can't have parts of it, like this face. I can't have this face as another UV, another texture. So pivot point at 0, 0, 0. Well, I can merge all of this, mesh combine, because that is how I exported them. And let's go ahead and look at my my text you use for this. Okay, it's called pir4_floor_large section.dds. And as we talked about earlier, the normal map should be named _nrm specular_spec. So with the model non-triangulated, because I have the triangulation happening automatically, I can export this thing, and I've already done that today, and placed it in a folder here in my Amnesia. So I have it here in a folder called large white room, and in this folder I have the floor section here. This is the model itself, ending in .dae, and then I have an entity file. This is basically a little text file made which tells the engine that the object, what type of object it is. It's a object, subtype static, and it gives it sort of values for the engine to use, such as health, and that are not used in this case, but it has collision, so it gives the model collision. And basically, if you want to have anything movable, you need to create an ent file for it. If it's just supposed to stay like a wall, it's supposed to stay as a wall, you can have it as oh yeah, that's the other thing where you should place them. Movable things, place them in entities, a subfolder. Just create a folder here and place your model there along with the textures. If it's supposed to be a static object, such as a wall, place it here in static objects in a subfolder. I've made a couple of different ones here, and I do this because it's faster, so I don't need to go in and create collision for it, because that takes time and I want to save time. So these models basically read the collision of the mesh here automatically. And that is not, however, these models though in the static objects one, they can't be hidden, so you can't do the show entity command through scripting, so you can't hide them through scripting or anything, but you can have them as walls or floors or like anything. You can't move them either, but if you want to do stuff like that, so you need to create disappearing entities and create an end file for it. So basically what happens when I import, I start out here with the floor section, so as in here, and I have the like model here, and I'll export it. And due to the naming convention of the texture, it's named like this. So as you can see, I have placed this texture file here as well, which is this one. You see that the name is the same. I pasted it now, it's the same. And this is the normal map for it, so it has almost the same name. It's underscore NRM underscore spec. And then I've made another one called cube alpha, which basically is a black and white image defining where the cube map is supposed to appear. So everything black doesn't appear. Here in the white it does appear. Image mode, grayscale, a TGA file. And mostly you would want to work with textures which are 1028 times 1028. There is really no need to go higher than that. And okay, I can show you basically my saving options for the textures. So let's open up this one. It is a txt file, so you need to get a plugin as well for Photoshop. And you can get it for GIMP as well. It's just search for txt plugin on Google, and you should be able to find it. So once I have that installed, I can start saving as DDS files. And first off, make sure that your image is 1024 times 1024, or 512 by 512, or 256 by 256, 128 by 128. There's really no need to go this low. So basically your model would be like 512 by 512 behind the textures, or 1024 by 1024, like most of them. And once they are that, you can save it as a DDS. So you save it. Do I want to replace it? Let's just save it as an example. So I have set it to DXT5 here in the drop-down menu. DXT5 is 8 bits per pixel, and that gives a higher, gives it like more, it can have more color variations, better color values than, for example, a DXT1, which is 4 bits per pixel. Sorry. So I have a DXT5 here, and we have something called generate mipmaps. And mipmaps is basically a smaller version of the texture. And you should have this selected, it's good. And then you save. But basically what mipmap does, mipmaps, they create copies of your texture in smaller sizes. So this texture here is automatically it automatically generates like a 512 version of it, and a 256 version of it, and a 128 version of it. And the engine then swaps between these versions. So the further away you are from something, the smaller the texture used will get. So the more of your screen is covered, the larger the texture it will use. And not having bitmaps can make your models look odd at a distance. They can look like pixely, whereas bitmapping smooths everything out at a distance. So that is something good to have. And I think that's about it. That should make your models work in Amnesia. Basically loading it up the first time in model view with your textures in the same folder will model view will automatically create a mat file for your model, and the mat file is a file ending in .mat, and it's basically just the texture file telling the engine where to look for your textures. So you have your model, and the engine reads the mat file, and the mat file tells it like, yeah, its diffuse texture is located at like program files initial dark descent / redist / static object / my folder. So it allows the engine to find your textures. And the mat file automatically links to any texture with the correct naming convention. And I'll link the correct naming conventions because there's actually an entry on the wiki with that. But unless you want to add some, like add or change something, let's say you want to add something more to your models textures, like another texture, you can go here, open up the material editor, and then open up the mat file which was generated. You can open up this one here. So it opens it up, and you can see all of the textures linked to it here. So you can just hit one of these and then add a new texture. You could hit like I added a cube map and a cube map alpha to this, and because I didn't use the correct naming conventions for those, so they were not added automatically. A cube map is never added automatically, I think. So you have to add those manually, and then go save here. In case you are creating like planes, just creating textures, you will always have to go into the material editor like this, and like go up here, select solid diffuse, tick diffuse, normal map, and specular, and then manually add your textures here. Like the normal goes there, specular goes here, and they all show up, and then you can save it in case you're making like a tiling floor or anything like that. And there's more maps to play with. Alpha hides parts of the texture, so in case you're making a grid thing, for example a net of some sorts, you can have an alpha for that, and the alpha is basically black and white. White shows it, black hides it. Height is kind of bugged. You should generally tend to avoid that, but you can have heights as well. Basically creates stretches out the texture to give it heights, whereas like normal mapping shadows things depending on angle. Specular gives the shine, you can see here. So where specular, like the red, gives the intensity of the shine, like how white is this shine, where the glass, the green channel of this picture, the specular is the red channel. The green channel gives like how focused this light is. So the whiter the green channel is, the more focused this highlight is. Illumination provides, like, you can use it for light sources. It gives the texture a light, so anything other than black on the illumination file will make it appear as a like a glowing surface. Dissolve alpha, I think that's used for the hair of the grunt. It's basically something which allows you to partially hide the texture. And the cube map you can use for the sky. It can be used to like give it a reflective surface, whereas it would reflect the cube map. And the cube map alpha defines where the cube map affects the texture. And I think this is everything. It should make you able to successfully import things. And I've also tried to go over the process, so I'll quickly go over it again. 1. Make sure your pivot point is at 0, 0, 0. 2. Make sure that your model has a texture linked to it, and the naming convention for the texture depends on the name of the texture linked here, the diffuse texture, only the diffuse texture in your modeling program. So this one is named like this, so the normal map should be named like this, _NRM. And thirdly, make sure that you have it triangulated, or that you triangulate on export. And fourth, export with something called OpenColada. It's a plugin. And then texture side, make sure that your texture is 1024 by 1024, 512 by 512. In pixel width and height. 512 to 56. 2048. Don't rarely use this. You can use it for characters or like very important objects. Otherwise, a 512 or a 1024 would suffice. And save it as a DDS. I save it as a example 2. I save it as a DXT5. And I generate maps for it. And maps are good, you should have them. Then, once everything is created, place them in a folder. The name of the model doesn't really matter. So this is the model. It ends in DAE. And the name of this doesn't really matter. What matters, the only thing which really matters is the name of your diffuse, where the name of the diffuse placed here in my folder should be the same name as the diffuse linked here in my modeling program. And for correct naming, the normal map should be named _ the same name as the diffuse, and adding a _NRM at the end. The specular should be named _spec at the end. That will allow you to automatically create the materials, the correct linking to them in a math file when you open your model here in Model View. If there's any questions, I can clarify. Good luck modeling.